Republic Hospitality Group. Welcome to Winnie's. Welcome to Christopher Luxon and your team, National Party team. Thanks. There's a whole bunch of you here, which is fantastic. Also, welcome Mayor Jim Bolt, Chamber of Commerce, and obviously all the community of business leaders who have been fighting really hard for the last 2 years for your businesses, team, families. We've just got fire exits at the entry there, also through the kitchen, and also out around the toilets, which is just around there to your right. So hope today we can show the team the real impact that we're actually been facing here and work on some solutions and keep fighting hard. Thanks. Here's Ruth.
Good morning, everybody. You all know me. On behalf of the Queenstown Chamber of Commerce and the Scale Network, I would like to welcome the business leaders of Queenstown to this esteemed establishment that is Winnie's. And thanks, Blair, for the introduction and the hygiene factors. Just to note, masks, as we have exclusive use of this venue, it is discretionary as to whether you wear one or not, but of course the use of masks is highly recommended at the moment. I'm just going to introduce, first of all I'd like to recognise and thank Mayor Bolt for joining us today, my chair Angela Speckman, thank you, and also Karan Nambia from Destination Queenstown, and unfortunately Richard was unable to join us today. And of course our esteemed guest, Member of Parliament, Mr Christopher Luxon, and the leader of the National Party and his team. We are really pleased to have you here. So without further ado, I will hand over to Joseph Mooney, our very, very active and supportive Member of Parliament.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And look, it's my pleasure as the local Member of Parliament to be here to introduce our leader, but I just want to thank Blair, Winnie's, for having us here, for Scale, Trish May, and for the Queenstown Chamber of Commerce, Ruth and your team, and Angela Speckman for pulling us together. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I know as being the local MP, it's been an incredibly difficult 2 years for the visitor economy. We're heading into our third year now of real serious challenges for this economy, and it's fantastic to have a leader who really understands this industry, having come from a position of leading the country's airline. And so it's my great pleasure to introduce Christopher Luxon.
Well, kia ora, good morning everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. I know many of you in the room from my old life, and I just sympathise with you because I know how tough it has actually been. Can I just acknowledge Blair and say thank you very much for hosting us at your place. When Chris Bishop found out that we were coming here, he was super excited because he may or may not have had a relationship dancing on one of your tables at some point through the process. Can I also acknowledge Mayor Bolt and just say, Jim, thanks so much. Jim and I go back a long way from his Christchurch Airport days, and we caught up last night, and I can just say you're a passionate advocate for everything in Queenstown. You're on the news, doing your job, telling the story, explaining the pain, the frustration that's coming from this place, and I think you're doing a great job advocating for the region so well. Can I just also acknowledge Ruth and say thank you for the work you do with the Chamber. Sometimes in New Zealand at the moment it feels if you're a business person that's not a good thing. I want to tell you being in business is a good thing. It's the lifeblood of this country. It's actually what enables us to be able to support all our social systems and everything else we want to happen in this great country of ours. So don't ever feel shameful or apologetic for being a business person. And can I also acknowledge Joseph to say, I can tell you in our caucus, he stands up and he talks about this region every single Tuesday with great passion, and so you know that you've got someone actually representing you incredibly well in our team. And can I just acknowledge the members of our team that are here today. Simon Bridges, who's going to be an outstanding Finance and Infrastructure Minister, already holding the government to account around cost of living. Can I also acknowledge Erica Stanford, who's been an exceptional job, as you would well know, around immigration and bringing some of the issues around critical workers and split family migrants to bear here in New Zealand. But she's also going to lead education for us, because I want education and immigration to be focused on building and buying in skills to this country so we can take it forward. We've got Chris Bishop, who's been doing a great job on COVID, proposing and being very constructive, I think, with the government, but also holding them to account. We've got Paul Goldsmith, who's our workplace relations spokesperson, is going to get into that this year. And we've got Todd McClay, who's been an outstanding representative around tourism. And again, I can tell you, Todd stands up in our caucus meeting and represents you guys incredibly well in our conversations as well. And today we've actually been in Queenstown yesterday and today. A lot of our focus has been about how we take the National Party forward, how we don't just oppose the government, but we actually also propose ideas. And part of that is actually getting out and about and away from our offices and away from ourselves and actually getting out and actually engaging and connecting with real people in the community doing real things. And so today we have all of our MPs broken into 6 groups out and about across Queenstown, engaging with people in the community on a range of different topics, so they get a sense and they hear it straight from the people and from the front line as to actually what's happening here. So it has been really good to be in Queenstown, and I have to say, given my background and having, we built tourism to be 10 to 12% of GDP and employed 350,000 to 390,000 people, to see what's happened over the last 2 years is incredibly heartbreaking for all of us that have invested so much over the last decade to make this such a great industry and such an important one for New Zealand as well. And so it has been challenging, because as you walk around, you've seen the businesses closed, we've seen the livelihoods lost, and we see that many people have been put through the ringer. And the conversations we've already had this morning with each and every one of you, there's a story behind that. There's a real cost to what's been happening here. And the reality is, the key takeaway is there's no clarity and you can't see a pathway back to normality. And that's the real thing you're crying out for, is where are we going and how do we get from where we are today to a different place? Dealing with Omicron is important, and I'm going to come back to that shortly, but we also do need to look further ahead and talk about what's going to happen, because too many Kiwis are doing it tough. From business owners who've laid off staff or shut down completely, thanks to COVID instructions, to families whose wages aren't keeping up with inflation, the reality is people are stressed. Kiwis' ability to be able to get ahead and to enjoy a higher quality of life depends, frankly, on the size of our economic engine. And right now, that economic engine here in New Zealand needs some serious upgrading. We're suffering from what we call a productivity disease. And what I mean by that is the average Kiwi works for an hour to earn what the average Australian earns in 44 minutes. Labour, frankly, just doesn't back business. And their only economic tool set that they've been deploying is to spend more of your money, with government expenditure hitting a staggering 68% increase since they came to power in 2017. And that spending is driving a massive increase to the cost of living. And basics, as you see now, like a block of cheese at $17, weekly rents up $125 since they came to power, that's making life incredibly tough. Our young people are seeing the dream of owning their very first home turn into a nightmare, and interest rates are only going to go up from here in order to get that inflation under control. And so the facts are really simple. The average family is now worse off than they were 12 months ago. And people are working even harder and are not getting ahead. Now, to rebuild our economy, we need to rebuild our connections with the world. Not overnight, but deliberately over time. So from signing the first free trade agreement with China, to Rocket Lab becoming the first private company in the Southern Hemisphere to reach space, New Zealand has a proud history of looking outward and stepping out into the world stage. And we need to reclaim that. We need to reclaim that confidence, that ambition, that aspiration, that positivity to go out there and to make things happen in the world. And you know that better than anybody else in any sector, given what you do here in the tourism sector. I want Aotearoa New Zealand to be world leading, a place where good enough, frankly, isn't good enough for us. We need to get the settings right so that a small business here in Queenstown can actually make sure their products are on the shelf in Sydney or in Singapore. We need to make it easier, not harder, for our businesses to link up with the US, with the UK, with Europe and Asia. And we need to attract top talent from all around the world, because they've got skills that will help grow the pie for all of us. And ultimately, we need to get tourists back here, because your livelihoods are built on that. And we need to be open for business. We're not going to rebuild our economy by drawing a moat around the motu. Government has a key role to play in either helping or hindering that. And I was talking recently to a small manufacturing company in my electorate which had won a new export customer, and it required them to put some investment into new plant and equipment, and also to hire 3 new employees. And I thought it would have been a great result for the business, for their community, and ultimately for our country, export-led growth. But they were so worried about constantly changing government policy, increased compliance and new regulations, that they chose not to proceed. And they lowered their ambition because of the government and because of red tape. And that's simply not the Kiwi way. We are go-getters, we are aspirational, we make things happen. Labor doesn't seem to understand that it's actually business, not government, that creates high incomes, creates the jobs, and it creates the growth. And government actions are actively discouraging New Zealand businesses from creating those jobs and lifting wages. And that's against a backdrop of COVID and Omicron, which is putting even more pressure on our communities. Now, on COVID, the next few months are going to be challenging for everyone: families, our young people in schools, and businesses here struggling after 2 years of economic disruption. And I'm happy to admit that the government did a good job of managing COVID in 2020, but 2021 was a shambles. And we entered that year with many opportunities that countries didn't have, and we squandered them, and they took their eye off the ball. It's become clear that the government's got stuck only looking a day or two ahead and never has had an actual plan. They seem like they're making it up as they go along. And for most of last year, we had the slowest vaccine rollout in the developed world after being told we'd be at the front of the queue. And it's just been so frustrating to watch a complete focus on announcements and spin rather than delivery. When Delta hit, just 20% of the eligible population was fully vaccinated. And so we went into a 15-week, $8 billion lockdown. Rather than delivering quickly on vaccines and rapid antigen tests and boosters, the government's response has relied on ever-extended restrictions on everyday life because there has been no plan. And history, frankly, is repeating itself with Omicron. And as I move around New Zealand, my sense is that people can tell the government is running out of ideas and they're running out of steam. I want National to be both critical and constructive. To oppose, yes, but also to propose positive solutions, because that's our job as an opposition party. And right through COVID, we've done the hard yards that people expect of the opposition. It hasn't always been easy, but I guess the proof is in the pudding, because usually what happens is the government rubbishes our ideas and then they pick them up a few weeks later, like pre-departure testing, like saliva testing, or a special fund to pre-purchase the next generation of COVID treatments. And I just want to acknowledge Chris Bishop, because he's the guy that's actually been proposing those ideas to the government and been pushing them to belatedly actually adopt those ideas. Omicron is a new challenge and it needs a new approach, and later this week Chris will actually release probably National's 10-point plan to adapt to Omicron, but I want to pull out 3 particular thoughts for you today. The first is this idea of rapid antigen testing. National's pushed for greater use of rapid tests for most of last year, because we should have been using them as an added safety mechanism when we had an elimination strategy. Using rapid tests under Omicron's, or not using rapid tests under Omicron, is just unforgivable, because Omicron moves so quickly and it affects so many people that it will overwhelm our current PCR testing system. Now, the government actually banned the importation of rapid tests for most of 2021, and lots of people have told me that they tried to bring them in and have them halted at the border. There is just no doubt that we will need rapid antigen tests to respond to Omicron, and we are miles behind the rest of the world. In the UK, you get sent them to your house. In Singapore, you can get them free from a vending machine. But here in New Zealand, the government's been confiscating them from private businesses because they just didn't order enough themselves. So even in the ill-defined phases of 2 and 3 of the government's new Omicron plan, rapid antigen testing doesn't have much of a role to play. And so the government needs to do 3 things. The first is to lift the ban on rapid tests. Let people take individual and personal responsibility by buying them from supermarkets and pharmacies as they wish. Second, let businesses, like the ones in this room here, order as much as you like and use them in your own workplaces. And thirdly, approve every current test approved in Australia here in New Zealand. And what is so different about Australia, that means that they've got over 60 types of approved rapid antigen tests and we have under 10. So let's just approve the Australian set today. Let's get that. That's a positive, constructive idea, choice for the government. Pick up that idea, run with that, do that now. Because at the moment what we've got is a triumph of bureaucracy over common sense. I also think personally that rapid antigen testing has a big role to play in our schools. In other places, rapid testing is a part of life for kids and teachers going to school, and it should be here too. National would provide every school with sufficient rapid antigen tests to conduct twice weekly surveillance testing for all students, teachers and staff just like they're doing in New South Wales and Victoria this week. Now, the second point I want to make is that we need to be much more pragmatic around isolation periods for people with COVID. The government's current plan is for people with COVID to isolate for 14 days and 10 days for their close contacts. Now, in fairness, that will go down to 10 days and 7 days once we hit phase 2 of their plan, whatever that means or is. But 10 days would still give New Zealand longer isolation periods than most other countries in the developed world. What we're trying to do here is to balance three things. Firstly, make sure that people actually go out and get tested, so we slow the spread of Omicron. Second is we're trying to balance the people getting tested. Secondly, we're trying to make sure they slow down the spread of Omicron. And third, we're making sure that we can keep communities actually functioning and supply chains open. And the danger with the government's current proposals is that people, frankly, just won't get tested because the consequences of testing positive will just make life too difficult for them and their family and their business. And that's the exact opposite of what we want. We don't want that. And National's view is that we should adopt a very simple approach of 7 days isolation for people with COVID and 7 days for close contacts. That 7 days is in line with what happens in the UK and Australia and many other countries, and is actually longer than what the US CDC's advocating and recommending of 5 days. Finally, the government has rightly recognised that rapid testing should allow contacts to return to work during the isolation period. But the government is going to set up a vast bureaucratic machinery to pick and choose which businesses will be able to, not be able to use this privilege, and it will only be, frankly, a very, very few. They've got things round the wrong way. Every business should be able to have their workers test to work unless there is good reason otherwise. And I think the third thing we need to focus on as we think about reconnecting to the world and putting ourselves on that pathway is that we need to end MIQ for vaccinated travellers to New Zealand and allow those people to isolate at home. New Zealand is now one of the very few countries, if not the only country, that actually blocks its citizens from returning home. Now, MIQ made sense when we were running an elimination as a strategy. Under a suppression strategy, it made less sense, and frankly, under Omicron, it makes no sense. Charlotte Bellis has rightly captured headlines in recent days, and her case is indeed a human tragedy. But I have to tell you, for every Charlotte Bellis, there are thousands more Kiwis around the world desperate to come home. And for 2 years now, New Zealand has had some of the tightest borders in the world. And very soon, thousands of people in New Zealand here will have Omicron, and the vast bulk of them are going to isolate at home. So meanwhile, unless we change MIQ, fully vaccinated Kiwi citizens without COVID will not be able to enter New Zealand and isolate at home unless they literally win the lottery. And that isn't right, it isn't compassionate, it's not fair, and it's not kindness. The businesses that rely on New Zealand being open and connected with the world are struggling, and we should end the lottery of human misery and reopen to the world. And we can't live here in splendid isolation forever. National would start by allowing New Zealand citizens and permanent residents to come home and skip MIQ if they're fully vaccinated. We would also prioritise critical healthcare workers, teachers and other essential workers who have been issued work visas to enter New Zealand. And after that, we'd move quickly to allow self-isolation for non-Kiwi like tourists, non-Kiwis like tourists, international students and other visa categories. Unvaccinated non-Kiwis would be banned from coming to New Zealand. So I guess in conclusion, what I'd say is that New Zealand has some real challenges right now, but the flip side to that is that we've got a whole lot of opportunities to do much, much better. The National Party I will lead will be relentlessly focused on helping Kiwis make the most of these opportunities. To rebuild our economy, we need to rebuild our connections to the world. And yes, that means ending MIQ, but that's just the first step on that path. We will get rid of the regulation and red tape that is preventing growth. We will have a strong focus on education, ensuring our school system is delivering the basics brilliantly. And we'll deliver the infrastructure that's needed to drive that growth. And we'll be ambitious about New Zealand's place in the world, because when we're at our best, Kiwis are world leaders and world beaters, and you know that better than anybody, having seen our tourism products and offerings over the many years that we've developed here. So I look forward to sharing more of those plans in the coming weeks and months. But again, can I just say thank you to each and every one of you for what you do in strengthening your community here and the businesses that you've built and the people that you support and those employees and the customers that you serve. It's really fantastic work and we really appreciate it. With that, thank you. And I just thought I'd open it up for any questions that you have, and what I'd really like is a chance for you to be able to direct also questions to our spokespeople that are here as well. So guys, if you want to come up on stage maybe, so everyone can see you, and then I will, any questions I'll answer or happy to send your way. Mayor Jim.
Just before you start, just so that you're all aware, is that after this Q&A session, and some of the MPs will be speaking with the media, but there will be small group opportunities to engage with them further. So if you feel like you don't have an opportunity to ask questions now, you will be able to.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Ruth.
Christopher and team, welcome to you.
Thanks, mate.
Later on for you. So please visit us while you're here. Society Wallet. Christopher, I've known you for a long time. Always admires the haircut. Well done. But you and I talked about this last night. I'd be interested to hear your views, share amongst others. This town has survived